Welcome to Second Amendment Explained. The Second Amendment is one of the most discussed, debated, and misunderstood parts of the United States Constitution. It is often mentioned in political debates, news headlines, and court cases, yet many people do not fully understand what it actually says, why it was written, or how it applies to modern gun laws in the United States. In this video, we will explain the Second Amendment clearly, calmly, and simply, without political opinions, so you can understand what it means and how it affects gun ownership today. Before we begin, it is important to clarify that this video is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Gun laws in the United States vary widely depending on federal and state regulations, and viewers should always check their local laws or consult legal professionals when necessary. The Second Amendment is part of the Bill of Rights, which consists of the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. These amendments were ratified in 1791, just a few years after the Constitution itself was adopted. The purpose of the Bill of Rights was to protect individual freedoms and limit the power of the federal government. At the time, many Americans feared that a strong central government could become oppressive, similar to the British rule they had just fought to escape. The exact wording of the Second Amendment is short, but its meaning has been debated for more than 2 centuries. It reads, "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." While this sentence appears simple, its structure and language reflect the style of the late 18th century, which can make it difficult for modern readers to interpret. To understand the Second Amendment properly, it is essential to consider the historical context in which it was written. In the late 1700s, the United States did not have a large standing army like it does today. Instead, local militias made up of ordinary citizens were expected to defend their communities if needed. These militias were seen as a safeguard against foreign invasion and domestic tyranny. Firearms at the time were also much different from modern weapons, typically single-shot muskets that took time to reload. The phrase, "a well-regulated militia," is often at the center of debate. In the language of the 18th century, well-regulated did not necessarily mean heavily controlled by government laws. Instead, it generally meant well-organized, trained, and functioning properly. Militias were composed of civilians who were expected to bring their own weapons when called upon. This is one reason why firearm ownership was considered important at the time. Another key phrase in the amendment is the right of the people. This wording appears in other amendments as well, such as the First and Fourth Amendments, where it clearly refers to individual rights. Because of this, many legal scholars argue that the Second Amendment also protects an individual right, not just a collective right tied solely to militia service. For much of American history, the Second Amendment was not heavily interpreted by the courts. Most gun laws were handled at the state level, and federal involvement was limited. However, as firearms technology evolved and society changed, questions about gun regulation became more prominent. This eventually led to major legal challenges and Supreme Court rulings. One of the most significant Supreme Court cases related to the Second Amendment occurred in 2008. In this case, the court ruled that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess a firearm for lawful purposes, such as self-defense within the home. This decision clarified that the right is not limited only to militia service. However, the court also made it clear that the right is not unlimited and that certain regulations are allowed. This distinction is extremely important. The Second Amendment does not mean that anyone can own any type of weapon under any circumstances. Laws can still regulate who can own firearms, what types of firearms are legal, where firearms can be carried, and how they can be used. These regulations are meant to balance individual rights with public safety. Federal gun laws establish a baseline for firearm regulation across the United States. These laws include requirements such as background checks for certain gun purchases, restrictions on firearm ownership for convicted felons, and regulations on specific types of weapons. However, states have the authority to create their own gun laws as long as they do not conflict with federal law. Because of this system, gun laws can vary dramatically from one state to another. In some states, open carry of firearms is legal without a permit, while in others it is heavily restricted or prohibited. Some states require permits for concealed carry, while others allow it without a permit. Magazine capacity limits, firearm registration requirements, and waiting periods also differ widely. This variation often causes confusion, especially for people who travel between states or move from one state to another. A firearm that is legal in one state may be illegal in another. Understanding these differences is essential for staying compliant with the law and avoiding serious legal consequences. Another common misconception is that the Second Amendment prevents the government from passing any gun laws at all. This is not accurate. Courts have consistently ruled that reasonable regulations are constitutional. The challenge lies in determining what is considered reasonable, which is why gun laws are frequently debated and challenged in court. It is also important to understand that the Second Amendment exists alongside other constitutional rights. Just as freedom of speech does not protect all forms of speech in every situation, the right to bear arms is subject to limitations. Rights come with responsibilities, and the legal system attempts to balance these factors. Over time, changes in society, population growth, urbanization, and advancements in firearm technology have influenced how gun laws are written and enforced. Modern firearms are far more advanced than those available in the 18th century, which raises new questions about regulation and public safety that the framers of the Constitution could not have anticipated. Supreme Court decisions continue to shape the interpretation of the Second Amendment. These rulings often focus on whether specific laws place an undue burden on the core right of self-defense. While the court has affirmed individual gun ownership rights, it has also upheld certain restrictions, reinforcing the idea that the Second Amendment is not absolute. The Second Amendment is also deeply connected to American culture and history. For many people, gun ownership is associated with self-reliance, personal freedom, and constitutional rights. For others, concerns about gun violence and public safety drive calls for stronger regulation. These differing perspectives contribute to the ongoing national conversation about firearms. Understanding the Second Amendment requires separating emotion from facts. It is possible to respect constitutional rights while also acknowledging the role of law and regulation. Education is one of the most effective ways to reduce confusion and misinformation surrounding this topic. This channel exists to provide that education. Our goal is not to promote or oppose gun ownership, but to explain the laws and constitutional principles that govern firearms in the United States. Knowledge empowers individuals to make informed decisions and engage in meaningful discussions. As we move forward in this series, we will explore topics such as state-by-state gun laws, concealed carry regulations, who is legally allowed to own firearms, and how recent court decisions affect gun rights. Each video will focus on clarity, accuracy, and neutrality. In conclusion, the Second Amendment is a foundational part of the United States Constitution that protects the right to keep and bear arms while allowing for regulation. Its meaning has evolved through history, shaped by court rulings, societal changes, and legal interpretation. Understanding it is essential for anyone interested in U.S. law, gun ownership, or constitutional rights. Thank you for watching Second Amendment Explained. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing to the channel for more clear and factual explanations of U.S. gun laws. Stay informed, stay legal, and stay educated.